Tonight, on Another Thing About Tartan, I am so pleased to welcome the lovely Gus Noble, all the way from Chicago, virtually, of course, to tell us his story. Gus is actually originally from Duns, the home of ScotlandShop HQ, and even went to school with our customer service manager, Sarah. Now president of the Chicago Scots and Caledonia Senior Living, tonight we're looking forward to hearing Gus's story. So welcome, Gus. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's lovely to have you with us. How is it in Illinois? Is the sun shining?
The sun is shining. Thank you very much for having me, and greetings to you and everyone in sunny Duns. I miss the place greatly. Get back as often as I can to see. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful day here in Chicago. It's been baking hot, up degrees into the 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So this particular Scotsman's been under the collar.
Yes. So tell us, Gus, how did you come to be in Chicago? What was your journey from Duns to Chicago?
After I graduated from Stirling University, I went to work in Edinburgh for a while, and I was working in Armstrong's clothing store, vintage clothes shop, which lots of people know. It's owned by with whom I played in a band. We played in a Chicago blues band and played all over Scotland. Started at Stirling Uni and just kept it going after I moved to Edinburgh. And I ended up traveling to Chicago to because we loved Chicago blues and because I met a couple of people who had been working in the Edinburgh Festival and decided to go and visit them. As it happened, I went into the British consulate while it was here because I wanted to see if there were any pubs back in those days that showed football matches from back home. And I'm a Newcastle United fan for my sins, so I knew that coming up between Newcastle and Liverpool at the time. And I walked into the consulate and the man behind the bulletproof glass said, "Oh, hello, you look familiar." And I said, "That's impossible. I just arrived in Chicago." And he said, "Oh, you're from Scotland?" "Yes, I'm from Scotland." "Did you ever spend any time in St Andrews?" And I said, "Well, I used to play in a band in Scotland and we played at a place called the Victoria Cafe in St Andrews." And he said, "Well, I was a student at St Andrews Uni and I was a regular at the Vic, and I saw you play in there."
You must have made an impression.
Must have been bad. So he said, "Let's go for lunch," and he took me for a roast beef sandwich in the Berghoff restaurant, which is right downtown Chicago. And over this sandwich, he offered me a job, and I called back to Edinburgh and said, I'm not coming home. I'm going to stay here, work for." I did that for 7 or 8 years. Then, following the devolution of government powers in the UK, the government of Wales was looking for somebody to help them set up their trade operations, and I did that very proudly. They even didn't tease me too much about the results when Scotland were beaten by Wales at rugby. And then in 2004, I was asked to apply for the job I have now, which is president of the Chicago Scots, and we're the oldest charity. We run a full retirement community just west of Chicago called Caledonia Senior Living. And I took that job in 2004 and have been here ever since.
Wow. What a story. That's a very good story. I like that. So I really loved Chicago when we were over last year. I was very taken by that kind of combination of the big city, yet you could just walk 5 minutes out of the centre and you were down lakeside and you had that open kind of country feeling. So what do you love then about Chicago? Why have you stayed there? What's kept you there?
Um, you know, almost immediately, when I first arrived here, I've met these guys playing music. I walked down Clark Street in Chicago, which is one of the biggest and busiest streets, and I walked past Wrigley Field, which is where the Chicago Cubs play, and it's featured prominently in the movie The Blues Brothers. So I thought, oh, I'm here in the big wide eyes, and here I am in the big city. And I kept walking for a little bit, and then happened upon this sign that hung above the pavement that said, "The Duke of Perth, Chicago's only Scottish pub." And I thought, well, I can't walk past it. I've got to go in. And I had visions of finding this bar, which is the quintessentially American bar on my first night there, with a barman in an apron cleaning a glass. And he throws a glass and slides along the bar and he says, "Tell me your problem, son." Well, I found a pub with a policeman from Stirling sitting in it, and he and I figured out that we knew some of the same people. And that sense of being somewhere thousands of miles away but still being connected has been a feature of my life here. And I became Chicagoan very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Although it wasn't until last year, the year before, that I became an American. Um, but I felt at home almost immediately. So I just love of the culture, the place, the attitude of Chicago feels very natural to me.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I was very taken by it. It was my first time there, and I really enjoyed it. Somewhere I'm keen to come back to and spend more time in. So tell us all about Chicago Scots then, and what's it all about, and how do you get involved?
Well, we're the oldest charity in Illinois. We were founded in 1845 when Chicago's population was only 12,000. It was just a wee frontier town in the middle of the Midwest. And a group of Scots got together on the 1st of December 1845 and said, we should do something, as Scots all over the world did, to celebrate the culture of the country we came from. And just like every other city around the globe, they formed a St. Andrew's Society. But they also did something quite visionary for 1845. They said, while we celebrate our culture and identity, we must also do something of service to those of our fellow country people who struggle to adapt to life after moving from Scotland to Chicago. And they created a statement of purpose, if you like. They committed to a written mission, which was quite visionary for 1845.
Mm.
And it was that no deserving Scot in need would go without food, shelter, medical attention, or be buried in a potter's field. So this culture and care, culture and service had always been the twin engines since 1845 that drove the organisation. And through the years, elements of that very broad mission, which I suppose had to be broad and bold as it was because we were the only charity around. There were no other charities at the time, so we had to do everything for everyone in the community. But through the years, elements of it were taken care of by other service organisations or government programs or churches or other charities. And we began to focus on the culture, promotion of the culture of Scotland and elder care. In the turn of the 1800s into the 1900s is really when we said elder care is what we should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we built something called the Scottish Home. Or actually, the first thing we did was rent a building on the south side of Chicago, close to where the White Sox play. And it was a building that was in a neighborhood that quickly became very overcrowded. The building itself became filled up, and the governors, the board of the organization said, I think rather than rent, let's build somewhere of our own, and let's create a model of care that um, can become the focal point of the community. So rather than us take our service to people where we find them, anybody in need automatically comes to us and we can be more impactful. So they built the Scottish Home in 1900, in 1910, sorry. In 1910 it was opened. The first people moved in from that home on the south side of Chicago. And there they lived very happily for 7 years until tragically there was a fire started in the basement of the building, and the two dogs who lived here, Topsy and McDougall, ran around barking, raising the alarm, waking up the residents and staff who all lived here. And most of them were evacuated to safety, but for a couple who were tragically killed in the fire, including one of the wee dogs who went in to try and save more of these poor souls, but she herself was lost in the fire. So we owe a lot to those two dogs. They saved most of the 30 odd people who lived here.
Mm.
The building was destroyed completely, and the board got together at the invitation of the then chairman, a guy called John Williamson. And he made this very bold and powerful statement. He said, "The Scottish home must not die in its own ashes. The Scottish home must always be a monumental tribute to the best qualities of the Scots." And such was its power and resonance, this statement, that although the building was literally destroyed down to its foundations, it took just 2 weeks for enough money to be raised for the building to be rebuilt, rehabbed, and reopened within 12 months. And it was quite a thing that John Williamson said, the best qualities of the Scots, because at that point we pivoted as an organisation. And whereas we'd been really focused until 1917 on serving the community of Scots and their wives and widows and children and grandchildren, um, we began to look at more of a values based, an inclusive way of looking at what the community really means. When he said the best qualities of the Scots, he was saying you don't have to be born or brought up in Scotland or have one of your grandparents have Scotland written on their birth certificate. It's more a question of those best qualities, the values that you hold in your heart. And we became a much more inclusive organisation at that point. And the phrase that we use to describe the organisation now is, we welcome everyone who's Scottish by birth, by heritage, or simply by inclination. Um, Although if you ask my wife, who is a Chicagoan, she's heard me say this so many times at these events we go to, and she'll know when I get to this point where I'm about to say, we welcome everyone who's Scottish by birth, by heritage, or inclination. And just before I said by inclination, she said, you can be Scottish by birth, by heritage, and she said, or in my case, by mistake.
Oh, happily by mistake, I'm sure.
There we are. We built on the Scottish home in the 1960s and 1990s, and it is now home to up to 85 residents in the old part of the Scottish home. A couple of years ago, we opened a building called the McLean House, which is for living with dementia, and that's 20 residents. So we have a small for the Chicago area, small but unique retirement community here, and I'm so proud of the people who live and work here, especially during this COVID-19 crisis that we're
Yeah.
all deal with.
And it is in a lovely, it has a really nice feel to it, having been there, that the kind of greenness around it. And I presume that's maybe helped a little bit, has it, during COVID, that at least you have some space around you?
We do,
We
yeah.
do, yeah.
Residents all love living here. It's a totally unique setting. We're just 7 miles from downtown Chicago, but we're surrounded by the forest on three of the four sides, and
Mm-hmm.
the side is by a residential street, so it looks very kind of idyllic.
Mm, yeah, it does.
Created this first chapter of a program called Cycling Without Age, which many of the care homes in Scotland are part of. In fact, Scotland's the only country in the world to make it a national initiative. This program that takes residents on these specially built three-wheel bikes with the rider at the back and a big seat, comfy seat for the resident, out and through the bike trails and the forests and so on. So, although COVID-19 put us in an advanced state of lockdown, we were still into the outdoors for, um, you know, physically distanced
Mhm.
exercise. And we bike rides through the forest and so on. And it's
Wow.
great.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. I remember when I was out in June, I think you were just trialing, was it the first one, and you were cycling it up and down the street.
That's
Yeah.
well, you know, in the days before COVID, we'd be kind of taking. I took a grandmother and her grandson out for a ride, and we're going through the wee kind of winding streets of Riverside. It's this beautiful suburb here with kind of Art Deco and prairie style architecture. Frank Lloyd Wright was a famous designer who lived just up the road in Oak Park. So there's many of his influences in the houses around here. And as we're riding through, the grandmother kind of held her grandson's hand and said, "See that house there? That's where I brought your father up. And there's the shop where I used to buy the groceries every week, and there's the school where your dad went, and it just felt wonderful to see this connection across generations by the simple act of taking a bike ride. And they started singing, and the wind was in their hair. It was fantastic.
Yeah. No, there is something about that about cycling, isn't it? That feeling of freedom, which when you're older, difficult to achieve. But yeah, a great initiative. So what about the Chicago Scots then? How
Yeah.
does that all tie in and how do people get involved with Chicago Scots?
Well, as I said, there's two sides, if you like, or
Mm,
two twin engines to our purpose. You have the care that I've been discussing, and then the culture from day
mhm.
one being a Scottish organisation. And so we host lots of different events from our Highland Games, which you and the guys
Yeah.
from ScotlandShop were at. We were delighted to a burnt supper, all the usual things, St Andrew's Day. But we also find that because Chicago's a fairly big city, we get the attention of artists or theatre groups or musicians will come through, and we try to do something to feature them and to create unique events around their tours and so on.
Mhm.
There's lots of different events. We have here at the home a museum of Scottish artifacts that tell the stories of Scottish journeys to the United States and accomplishments here, whether it's a families or a companies or someone like Encyclopedia Britannica, which started in Edinburgh but now makes its home in Chicago. They're very much part of the story of what the Scots have done for Chicago. And through our cultural programming, we try to tell those stories. We have a genealogical library here and a research library. We have an active history forum. They in the days pre-COVID would meet once a month and have lectures that were either beamed in from universities or academics in Scotland, or we'd have live speakers who would help tell the stories of Scots in the United States. We're not just about kind of the historical view over our shoulder. We try to work with Scottish businesses through a business forum and a law society to help tell people what Scotland of today as much as the Scotland of
Mm,
yesterday. And I was just this morning swapping a message with the Scottish Affairs Office over at the embassy in DC to look at a program of activities now that we've all pivoted to kind of digital connections. What does the world look like in the world ahead of us, and how can we be part of Scotland's engagement with North America in that new post-COVID world? So very much kind of looking forward as much as looking back. And anybody who has an interest in those views, either historic or a view of the future, can just drop us a line, give us a phone, send us an email, and there'll be something that's happening in this organisation that's for everyone.
mhm.
Next month we're having a virtual Highland Games. If we
Yes.
meet together in person, we're going to meet in cyberspace, and quite what that's gonna look like, we don't know, but we'll have fun nonetheless.
Sure you will.
Uh, we in, when we went into the COVID lockdown at the nursing home, we realised that job number one was to protect lives, but we must also be mindful of kind of mental health and
Mhm.
emotional, social health. So it's almost a cliche, but residents and seniors love to play bingo, and they were saying, look, can we not figure out a way that we can all play bingo together? And a donor helped us install a new high tech, all singing, all dancing TV system that allowed us to stream live content like the
Mhm.
conversation now into every resident's room. So we asked for one of the actors from this TV show called Chicago Fire to read bingo as we broadcast it to resident rooms. Each of the residents had some kind of noisemaker, a whistle or a rattle or some type of bell.
Mm.
And if bingo, they'd ring the bell or rattle. And those of us who were stationed around the community had radios, and we could radio up to somebody who was talking to the TV personality that said, Anna's just won bingo. And then it would kind of chaos would go through the community. But I tell this story to say there's a spirit of kind of resilience and reimagination, but a determination that we're not going to have a bad time. And it's
Mm.
a Highland Games. COVID may have stopped us from hosting the Highland Games in person, but however it happens, and even if it is chaos, we're going to host a games and make something work to keep smiles on faces and warmth in hearts.
Yeah. There's so much good stuff, isn't there, going on where we maybe can't have the normal events, but you can still actually enjoy it. Well, and something like a Highland Games, all the music and the atmosphere, you can recreate that. No, we look forward to being part of that. We'll have our cabers ready to toss or whatever is required. So tell us then about Illinois tartan, because I've actually got a picture of it here if I can manage the technology, because there's a bit of a story behind that as well, isn't there? There we go, got it there.
Tartan, yeah, it was created by a lady who's been part of our organisation for a long time. Like me, she was born in Dundee, although I was brought up in Duns. I was originally born in Dundee, as was Frances Gillen, and she came here years ago, and we said, we need a tartan for Illinois. St. Andrew's Society, as the Chicago Scots, our official name is Illinois St. Andrew's Society. And so we worked with the National Registry of Tartans back in Scotland and created a tartan that was evocative of some of the kind of icons of Chicago. The colors represent sports teams, and the color of Lake Michigan, red, white, and blue, to represent states. The white for the Chicago flag, the red for the stars on the Chicago flag, the blue for the background, and then there's several icons of Illinois in there. They even got, if you look very carefully, the colors of the Chicago Cubs and the Chicago White Sox, who are the two rival baseball teams.
Mm-hmm.
And then we noticed through our friendships and frequent communications with the other St Andrew's Society and Caledonian clubs and Scottish organisations around the country that many of the states in which they're located had tartans of their own. So we wrote to the governor. This is years ago, long before I was ever part of the society. Uh, we wrote to the governor of Illinois saying we'd love to share our tartan with all the people of Illinois to make it belong to everyone, whether you're Scottish or not. You have a tartan to represent you in Illinois, and they said no. Originally, they said it's frivolous. It was at a time. I think it was right around the time of 9/11. When
Yeah.
the world was in a state of chaos as it seems to be now. But we revisited it a few years ago, and I'm very proud to say that the governor said yes, and he signed a proclamation to make the Illinois St Andrews Society tartan the official tartan of all the people of Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I was thinking about wearing today, but given that it's so baking hot outside, I thought it's not exactly the right garment or garments to wear. It was a beautiful suit that you made, Anna. The tartan. I promised Aisha, my wife, I would never wear the waistcoat, the jacket, and the trousers together.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, you have to. It looks fantastic.
I broke that promise. I've worn it quite a lot actually, and actually, we have here at Caledonia um, a dance studio in the basement,
Mm-hmm.
and these Highland dancers come in every week, and they've got to know all the residents here really well. And when we went into lockdown, the dancers really made their friendship with residents. So they'd come out, and in the gardens and courtyards of the building, they'd bring a bagpiper and they'd dance outside the residents' windows. It's a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful.
Brilliant.
And the local TV station got wind of this and decided to send out a film crew. And so everybody in the office said, "This is the perfect time to wear your suit, Gus." So I ran downstairs, and it was on a Tuesday afternoon. And the cameraman and the interviewer said, "So tell me about that suit." And I said, "Oh, this is just my Tuesday suit. You should see me on a Friday." Um, I get a lot of. I've had a couple of wolf whistles. I've had a
Uh-huh.
suit, so I'm really
Good.
enjoying it.
Good. I always think, well, my husband, the first time he wore a full three-piece tartan suit, and he was a bit, oh, I'm not really very sure. I feel like I really stand out. But you get used to it, don't you, as soon as yeah, you've worn it
Yeah,
a few times. But you're not exactly shy and retiring, Gus, so you're not worrying.
yeah. People come to expect it. Don't
Yeah.
wear it.
Oh, well, we'll have to create you another one then. We'll just have to
Yeah,
keep. Well, you'll become like Doddy Weir because we've created so many for him, and just every now and then he says, "Oh, I need a new one. I need a new one to shock people with." So
right. Well, there's other things I'm thinking we could wear with it, and well, more to come on that, Anna.
good. I was thinking the one thing we hadn't thought to do for you was tartan face masks. 'Cause we've made so many face masks, so we'll have to send you a face mask to match your suit, Gus.
Well, thank you, thank you.
We'll
We
get that organised.
do face masks. You know what? One of the things we did in the lockdown was recognise that the staff. We've all heard how frontline caregiving staff in hospitals and healthcare homes and senior care homes truly are heroic at this particular time. Behind the Scottish home, I see these people come to work and just do acts of incredible compassion and kindness for the people that not necessarily they're there to serve the residents, but for one another. There's a sense of all being in it together. So
Mm.
they truly were heroes. And there was a well-known artist in Chicago with whom I've become friendly, and he said on Tartan Day, actually, he called me up on the day before, on the 5th of April, and he created these colouring book images for young families to do every day during lockdown. And they were all of his, including some of these. He's really well known locally in Chicago, but he became as well known in DC when the Obamas were in the White House. They invited him to make the Christmas decorations for the White House. So his profile really took off then. He said, what should I feature on the 6th of April on Tartan Day? And I said, well, it really has to be Robert the Bruce because it's the anniversary of the 700th anniversary of him signing the Declaration of Arbroath.
Mhm.
And so image of a hero. And I said, David, by the way, his name's David Lee Sisko, great artist. And I
Well,
said,
we
David,
can.
we're celebrating our 175th anniversary this year. So how about we create a campaign to raise support for heroes at Caledonia Senior Living, and we'll feature a different Scottish hero every month, and you can design them.
Ah, yes, I've seen these. They're brilliant.
Heroes for Heroes campaign. So the first
Yeah.
month was Robert the Bruce, the next month it was Mary Queen of Scots,
Mm.
and like My Love Is Like a Red, Red Rose, newly sprung in June. Then June's hero was Robert Burns, and we thought it can't just be the usual suspects. We'll release one every month and keep people guessing. And the hero for July, to celebrate the anniversary of the lunar landing and the moonwalk,
Yes.
Neil Armstrong.
Yeah.
Got some really good heroes.
I think that's my favourite one so far. I like the Neil Armstrong. That was in my shopping basket.
Yeah, me too.
Brilliant. Well, and they're really different. The way he's done them, it's a really kind of modern take on, yeah, on history. Oh.
Oh, he's got ones coming up. Some that are left field, and some of the usual suspects are in a different presentation, a different context.
Mhm. Oh, I look forward to. I'll obviously have to get a collection then going with these. Yeah, they're good.
So masks, t-shirts, mugs, umbrellas, Christmas decorations, all sorts of stuff. But tartan face masks are something a few people have been asking me for, Anna. So we should talk.
Oh, right, we'll get that organised. Definitely. Well, we have sold over 1,000 face masks, and that we've been making, and so we give 20% of the proceeds of these to the NHS. So it's been great. It's kept us busy at a time when we've had less orders. It's kept our seamstresses busy. We've been able to give something back to the NHS. So it's been really good. We feel like we've at least done something, a little something to help. So.
Thank you. No, that was very. And you sent a message from Duns for Mother's Day here. We collected a whole series of video messages from all over the world, and we put them into a montage, and it was messages to wish for Mother's Day residents and staff a happy Mother's Day, but also to encourage them to keep going and to recognise that they're really stepping up and helping in an incredible way. And I thank you. I really appreciated you sending that message, Anna.
Oh, no, no, it's good. And that was outside in the wind, wasn't it? It was a kind of wild day. Oh, no, it's good. I love the creativity that you always do really interesting and different things. I really like that.
Thank you.
It appeals to my marketing brain. So tell us then more about, so we've moved a bit onto tartan there. What about you then? You have your own family tartan. Have you always been into your Scottish roots, or have you become much more Scottish since you went to Chicago, or?
Um, Nobles are Macintosh tartan, so I have kilt that my dad bought for me. And I have to say, he only bought it after I'd left Scotland to come to Chicago. So I was very proud of being a Scot when I lived in Scotland, but I wasn't so much into tartan. And I've grown to really appreciate it through the years. And if you come to the Scottish Home now and you look at my office in particular and the hallway outside the office, it looks like a tartan tornadoes come through. You know, it's everywhere. Um, I've grown to really appreciate what being a Scot is all about. Um, as I helped work with the board to create a new long range strategic plan for the organisation, we kind of asked ourselves, well, what does it mean to be a Scot in the years that we live, and what will it mean in the future? And certainly, if you look at being Scottish by birth, heritage, or by inclination, in the United States, there is a sense that we had a board retreat. Let me start there to kind of figure this plan out. And we put our hands in the air, all of us, and said, everybody keep your hand in the air if you're 100% Scottish. And of course, within seconds, there were only 2 or 3 hands left in the air. And we said, anybody whose children are 100% Scottish, keep your hand in the air. And by the time we got to grandchildren, there were no hands in the air. So it goes to show that people in future will have claims on multiple different cultural identities. Mm-hmm. So what does it mean to be a Scot, and how do we make it fun? How do we make it compelling and relevant and so on? And I think particularly in the world we find ourselves in with the the Black Lives Matter movement and the messages that we as Scots and we as non-black people have a role to play in representing in a respectful way the cultures and the countries that we come from, but recognizing that at this particular time, yes, our mission is to nourish Scottish identity, but certainly not at the expense or detriment of Black lives, because Black lives truly matter right now. They're the ones that are under attack. So I think as the world changes, as the world becomes very different, organizations like ours will have a role to play in not necessarily just representing a culture and celebrating the icons of that culture, but in sharing those with the world. Mm-hmm. So art is a great way of inviting others to be part of an engagement. If you think about how it claim on multiple different identities, if tartans become representative of not necessarily heritage, but heritage of values, heritage of ways of thinking in the world, then Scotland become opportunities for engagement with different groups and others. And that's the approach I want to take. Yeah. I come to that by, I became an American a couple of years ago. I had the last election, very strong views, but I was frustrated that I didn't have a vote in the last election. So I said, I owe it to the years I've spent here, these 20 odd years I've lived here as I owe it to my wife and I owe it to my two sons to become an American so I can have a vote and make a difference in the world in which we all live. So I put in the applications. I was fortunately I said and did the right things and they didn't kick me out. And I was wearing my oath of allegiance down on Congress Avenue at the U.S. Immigration Center. And as I'm sitting there in my best tartan, actually I wore the tartan ScotlandShop tie from the Dunn's Pipe bag.
Oh, yeah.
Of home. I sat there and there's a set of seats where everybody who's waiting to become a citizen sit, and then next to it is a set of seats for family and friends and loved ones. And I looked at the back of the room, and there are floor-to-ceiling windows. The light is just pouring in, and on the floor was a big map of the United States, and each is huge. This map, and each state was represented by a different vivid primary color. So with the light coming in and these different colors, it was a really vivid scene. And on the rug, I looked and there were kids that were all playing together, and each one had hair and skin and personalities that were as different and varied as the map below their feet. And they were all playing peacefully. And I thought, that's America. That's, I mean, what can I see that is more powerful before I swear my oath of allegiance? Especially because one of them was my son. And it was really powerful. It made me realize what my own journey and my own identity are becoming.
Yeah, interesting. No, that's good. Okay. Tell us then just a little bit about you then, as because I know you love your music. So obviously your music is partly how you ended up in Chicago. So have you carried that on since you've been here?
I met, in fact, the band I played with in Scotland was called Welcome to Bluesville, and the drummer was the guy that Brendan O'Brien is his name. He owns with his family Armstrongs, and the guitar player was a guy called Ronnie Ballantyne, who I think is one of the best musicians I've ever played with. Just an incredible talent on the guitar. And he used to tell me about his older brother, John, who had lived in the States but moved back to Scotland. And he said, John is a great guitar player. I'd really like him. And after having moved here, John and Ronnie called me up and said, you never guess what, but John is moving back to the States and he's moving to Chicago. So he moved out to the far northwestern suburbs, and we got together a couple of times to play golf, but we lost touch. And then a few years ago, he called me up and said, Gus, Ronnie used to tell me how much he enjoyed playing music with you, and I've decided that I'm going to start playing music again after having given it up for all these years. And you seem miserable without music. So I think the most logical thing, two Scots, John's family is from Ayrshire, Berkshire. He said the most logical thing two Scots in Chicago could do is form a honky tonk band. So we ended up forming this band that plays the music of Johnny Cash and John Prine and Chris and all the great kind of honky tonk players. And in actual fact, we had our first rehearsal just yesterday.
Oh, wow.
I haven't seen each other in 4 months. Said we really need to, not only are we getting rusty as players, but we really miss each other's company. So we got together in the garden in the front yard, all physically distanced, and we had the drums over there and bass over there. And we started running through a rehearsal, and all of a sudden the neighbours came out and sat in their gardens with their deck chairs and a couple of beers, and we had a little concert in the neighbourhood. It was
brilliant. Yeah. Excellent. Well, we have our kids go to the Berkshire High School, and the English teacher there every Saturday night, Huffman, has been doing a bit of a concert for us all, and he's been doing it on Facebook. And that, as a community, it's been fantastic. It's just all been tuning in and yeah, making our requests. So yeah, I'm impressed because I am not a musical person. I love music, but can't play anything myself. So, and do your kids play? Are they going to play? Do you think?
Well, Bobby's 5 now,
Oh, so
and
it's quite.
yeah, he loves. He's got great taste in music. Actually, the only thing that would calm him when he was a baby, it was Louis Armstrong, and I tried. I thought, well, he clearly likes jazz, and I tried other jazz artists, but he insisted on Louis Armstrong. He then has got really into a guitar player called J.D. McPherson over here, who's a great guitar player. And Langston is his brother. He's just 18 months old now. Uh, he is clearly going to be musical. If
Mm,
whatever it is, he'll jump up and dance and insist that others who are in the room with him, wherever they are and whoever they are, get up and dance with him too.
mm.
If you put T Rex on, you'll find a very active and noisy 18 pulling your hand to say, "Come on, let's do it."
So you're not going to turn them into bagpipe players then?
If they want, they've heard bagpipes certainly at our Highland
Yeah,
Games.
yeah.
Bobby Bobby has a lot of books that I brought from Scotland
Hmm.
that are about bagpipers, and in fact, I just took one home the other day, the Magic Bagpipe, and he enjoyed reading that. His favourite thing is Nessie at the moment.
Hmm.
He's
Yes.
insistent that the next trip we take home, that he and I go and find Nessie and bring her back, and she can live in Lake Michigan.
In Lake Michigan. I'll not dare go for a swim next time then. Very good. Oh, thank you, Gus. I've really enjoyed chatting to you as I always do. And we're very sad to miss the Highland Games, but we're looking forward to joining you virtually. And then next year we'll hopefully be back to normal.
We'll be doing the
So,
game, and we can't wait to welcome you and everyone from the Scotland Shop back to Chicago. We really enjoyed having you here, and I have a shopping list now for face masks and other.
other things. Quite right, quite right. No, well, that's great. Well, thank you very much for joining me, and good luck with everything. And I hope you all stay safe at the Caledonia Senior Living, and look after yourselves. And we'll see you very soon, hopefully.
Thanks, Anna, and all the best to everyone in sunny Duns, and
Thank you.
be safe. And
Thank you.